What is going on, guys? It's your boy Luke here for our DFS live stream for the Rbc Heritage. We'll be covering the weather, what I expect the course to play like this week, if there's been any changes since my course breakdown, of course, our player poll projections, any of your live questions, and at the end, a little bit of strategy talk for cash contest, single entries, GPPs to go ahead and wrap it up. So as always, a little bit of a longer stream here, going to be about an hour, maybe even an hour and a half. So if there's any questions along the way, do not be shy at all to go ahead and ask. But we are going to go ahead and start with a review of last year's event, and then, of course, the weather for Thursday and Friday. So a review of the 2021 Rbc Heritage. You can see the scoring average was relatively low. It is a easy scoring fest here, but the golf course, it's a Pete Dye design. It definitely has its intricacies. It's more just a byproduct of it being a relatively short golf course, it being relatively not undulated. There's not very fast greens. They're running at right around 11 and a half, but you still have to think your way around this course. You can't just bomb and gouge it out there. If you do miss left to right off the tee, you are going to have a penalty for it. Now, there's not a ton of water in play. There's water in play off the tee in around 7-8 holes where it's usually 20 to 30 yards offline though, so it's not that easy to hit. You can see over here in terms of penalty strokes per round, it's only 0.12 strokes higher than the PGA Tour average. So even with 18 water hazards in play, it's not really in play as much as you would think. So it is a relatively easy golf course, especially compared to some of those Florida swing courses or major championships, Players Championship over there, TPC Sawgrass, those type of venues. But it isn't that easy to hit fairways. So even though you are clubbing down a lot, this is a relatively short golf course, right around 7,200 yards, a little bit less than that. You're only hitting right around 63.2% of fairways, which is a whole almost 3% less than the PGA Tour average. You would expect with laying up that it would be higher than average, but they are relatively narrow at Harbour Town. And then for greens and regulation, you can see you hit right around 4.5% less than the PGA Tour average. That actually is a little bit surprising. It's actually a little bit higher than we would expect because the greens here are only 3,800 square foot on average, which is tiny. Usually the PGA Tour average is right around 5,600 square foot on average. So right around 1,800 square foot less than what we're used to seeing. So I would actually expected that number to be much lower, but it is very receptive. It is a coastal golf course. So these greens aren't going to have much bounce to them. And the guys that are really precise with landing their golf ball in the right spot are going to get quite a bit of an advantage. Now, in terms of the weather, it's what we would expect for Hilton Head, going to be relatively windy. You can see 9 to 13 miles an hour of sustained winds for much of the morning. And in the afternoon, that's going to be the case as well, 13 to 14 miles an hour. And the gusts, right around 22 miles an hour for the entire day. So you're dealing with usual coastal conditions, right? Where it's going to be, you're going to feel it on your face. You're going to feel it on your back when that wind is blowing against you. But when it starts to gust, you're going to see a bunch of players backing off. It's going to be, 25, 20 mile an hour wind gusts. Those you don't want to be hitting it. And of course, it's going to be unavoidable. You're going to see some of these players get gusted. That's where a majority of these penalty strokes come in. And most of them are on the par threes. A lot of the par fours, par fives, where there is technically water in play, players don't usually hit into those. It's not like TPC Sawgrass or a PGA National where it's much more prominent for players to end up in those type of spots. It's usually the par threes here because of those wind gusts that do cause the players the penalty strokes. If we take a look at Friday, it's similar. It's actually a little bit less windy, but still very flat across the day. You can see, 9 to 12 miles an hour wind for much of the day, a little bit less in the morning than in the afternoon, but the wind gusts are in the teens for the entire day. So in general, in terms of a morning afternoon wave split, if you really, really want to look into it, there might be a slight PM AM split, but we're talking like a tenth of a stroke at the most, not anything to act on in your DFS lineups. A tenth of a stroke for one round isn't going to be enough to sway you over a 4-round sample size. So I don't think you need to look into it too much with the weather. Just expect your usual windy conditions here at Hilton Head. That's really the only defense here at Harbour Town because it is so short, because these greens are receptive, because they don't have much undulation. They're also running at just 11 on the stint meter. It's really easy across the board. I mean, even off the tee, if you're not hitting driver off the tee, that's a relatively straightforward shot. Just the wind is the only thing that can really take these players off their game. I'll go ahead and hop over to the player poll now, and I'll remind you, if there's anybody you want me to do a deep dive on, just go ahead and throw their name down there in the chat, and you're going to see a few extra columns here. So These aren't going to be up the entire time, but I have added an extra 3 columns to the projections here, that being 150 max, single entry, and cash contest. So instead of just having this in my player pool over here, which will be just the in general tab for this week, if you're a part of the Patreon, you're going to have access to all of these over here. So if there's anybody we need to do a deep dive on, you're trying to get my takes on in a very nuanced fashion, we're going to go through that. But in general, with the live stream here, for people that aren't part of the Patreon, I'm just going to stick to the in my player pool tab, right? Because those are supposed to be for Patreon members. Just understand that. But if you are a part of the Patreon, just make sure to bring up the spreadsheet, and you guys can, of course, follow along in those tabs. We're going to go section by section. So let's start with the guys that are $10,000 plus. And you can see I have my eye on 4 of them. So those being DJ, Collin Morikawa, Patrick Cantlay. Actually, I guess Shane Lowry isn't in that 10K range. So it is just 3 of these guys up top. Shane Lowry's close to it, right? He's $9,800. I wanted to play GT, but I just can't, right? You can't play everyone up top because I'm playing Collin Morikawa, who as of right now have at 21.6% projected ownership. I'm going to have to allocate 35-40% of my lineups to Collin, and that just takes away everything I could allocate to somebody like a JT, because guys like DJ, I'm looking to get significant leverage to. Absolutely love the play this week. If anything has been holding him back, it has been the driving accuracy. But here at Harbour Town, he's probably not even going to have a driver in his bag. Would not be surprised at all to see that. 3-wood being the most de-lofted club that he'll have in the bag. So really like him there at $10,500. The approach play looked really solid at the Masters. The putting was also there. Do like Patrick Cantlay. He's good at Pete Dye golf courses. He's not coming in with the best form. So if you're going to fade anybody up top based on form, that would be Patrick Cantlay, but that won't be me this week. He's shown an ability to shake it off in the past. And Collin Morikawa, I really wanted to fade the guy, but I can't. I absolutely love the play. I think it's a perfect course fit. This specific venue, Harbour Town, was literally prototyped for Collin Morikawa. Be accurate off the tee, be able to plot yourself around this golf course, not just hit it in the fairway, but hit it in the right part of the fairway. That's exactly what Collin Morikawa is able to do. In terms of hitting greens, the 3,800 square foot, there is no better player at hitting the specific part of the green that you need to than a Collin Morikawa. Right? He led the tour last year from 125 to 150, 150 to 175, and 175 to 200 last year in a shots gained approach. Nobody has done that ever on the PGA Tour, and Collin Morikawa did it last year. This guy hasn't been his best of late. If we take a look at the shots gained approach, he started to improve. It's closer to half a stroke gained per round now, but this is a guy who should be gaining over a stroke per round with the approach. When he has his best stuff, that's what you're going to get from a Collin Morikawa. If he continues to do his thing off the tee, if he continues to be a decent putter, and he's not going to ever be a great putter. This is somebody who self-admittedly is one of the worst putters on tour. If he can just be right around a neutral putter, right around neutral with around the green play, that might be enough to win this golf tournament. So absolutely love him here. Just really can't poke a hole in his game. And much like a Dustin Johnson, he doesn't even need driver. He has more than enough distance with that 3-wood. He's also extremely precise with that 3-wood. Just think of that shot with the PGA Championship there at Harding Park. The guy can place it exactly where he needs to, and he's very confident with it. So do love those 3 guys on the 10K range. Again, I wish I could play Justin Thomas. Just a case of opportunity cost. You can't play everyone that you want to, and DJ Collin and Cantlay just slightly edge him. And in terms of price, right, it's also a little bit more affordable. He's the most expensive guy on the board. We haven't seen the most expensive guy on the board win a golf tournament in quite some time, other than Scotty Scheffler. Before that, it was Jon Rahm at the U.S. Open, which was an extremely long time ago. Just something that doesn't happen all that often, right? That's why the top guy on the board, unless it's Jon Rahm, is usually a fade for me, because I just don't see it happening all that often. So if I had to, nitpick anybody up top, that's going to be the reasoning there. But let's talk about Shane Lowry. Absolutely love him here at $9,800. He's really starting to show us something. And, he'd done this for spurts in the past where he'd start to gain off the tee. He was always a really solid approach player. He never really loses that for Shane Lowry. He's always a really good iron player. Around the green and putting, he's always going to be well above average. He'll have his spike weeks with the putter, and that's where when you want to be there for a Shane Lowry. The issue was the off the tee play, right? He would bleed strokes off the tee. It was something that was really costing him a lot of these golf tournaments, particularly with the accuracy, but that has not been the case of late. The guy is a completely different player off the tee. So if we go ahead and look at this, you can see he's gaining over half a stroke per round. That's more strokes off the tee than Collin Morikawa, more than DJ, more than Patrick Cantlay, and only just slightly less than a Corey Connors. So if you're telling me that this guy took something that was, a weakness, at least for a little bit. Historically, he wasn't all that bad off the tee. I mean, when he was winning the Open Championship, that part of his career, he was much better in that category. But I'm talking, 3-4 months ago until maybe even a whole year and a half ago, he did go through a stretch there where it was rough. So that's where you've seen this resurgence, because the rest of his game has always been there. And if he can continue to do this, he's going to really do some damage. He could win major championships because he has that type of game. At a coastal track where we could see conditions get dicey, right? Those 25-mile-an-hour wind gusts aren't anything to scoff about, right? And if it just gets 5 to 10 miles an hour higher for the sustained winds, a front comes through, or let's say the system is a little bit more severe than these guys are expecting, it could cause scores to go high. You could see a single-digit under par winner. And if that happens, Shane Lowry is winning this golf tournament if that happens. So do you like him there as a sleeper pick? I expected him to be chalky, but I only have him at 16% right now. So when I made my sleeper picks video, he was lower owned than 16%. He was closer to 10%. So he has creeped up a little bit there, which is not ideal. But at the same time, I'm still willing to eat that type of ownership, given the upside, especially if things get a little bit dicey. Now, my favorite play on the slate is Daniel Berger. I said this early in the week. He was my second man in, but he's my most convicted play of the week. I've been on him early in the week. He was somebody who I identified extremely quickly, and it seems like people are kind of coming around to it, right? He was single-digit owned just a few days ago. Now he's 12.8% owned. Just has a perfect game for this course. Doesn't need to hit driver. He's always extremely accurate off the tee. The approach play for DB has been unbelievable for quite some time. So if you take a look at the last 24 measured round, there's been a few hairy starts of late. But the last 50 measured rounds, which are a much better sample size, right? Much more consistent, right? Much more stable than just looking at the last 5 to 6 events. He's gaining nearly 0.6 of a stroke per round, which is one of the best numbers in the entire field. It's up there with guys like a Colin Morikawa over that stretch. Russell Henley over that stretch has been unbelievable, who we're going to talk about here in a second. Yet still hasn't done anything. Right? That's the crazy thing about Russell Henley, is his stats always look like this, but he never does anything. I don't want to get too ahead of myself. We'll talk about it in a second here. But Daniel Berger's stats, right, gaining across the board except with the putter. But of late, the putter's been a little bit better, right? He's actually been gaining in that, 15 100ths of a stroke per round in that category, right around 17 100ths of a stroke per round around the green. Just, not that bad, something we can get by with right there. But the more important stuff's the long-term stuff. And, really with some of these players, they're going to go through those ebbs and flows on the PGA Tour, much like somebody like a Patrick Cantlay. If we take a look at the last 24 measured rounds, it doesn't look all that good, right? He's losing on approach. He's somebody who's losing with the putter. Now, is Patrick Cantlay somebody who's going to lose with the putter and lose with the approach play historically? Hell no, right? Take a look at the last 50 measured rounds. He's gaining with the approach play, gaining significantly with the putter. Just, make sure that you're not constricting yourself to one view of, one frame when you're looking at somebody, right? If you're just looking at the last 24 measured rounds, you're going to get a set of, 15, 20 players that are going to be way better than the rest of the field. Now, if you just ran lineups like that, all recent form guys, I guarantee you it doesn't work. That would be way too simple. You have to be looking at the entire picture, right? Sometimes what you're ideally looking for, and this is why I like going to somebody like a Colin Morikawa, is when the long-term recent form is indicative of what we've seen of late, right? Where he's gaining close to half a stroke per round off the tee on approach. He's getting back to that, right? Over the last 24 measured rounds, that's the exact type of thing that he's doing. Now, around the green and the putter, very similar story for Colin Morikawa over that stretch, right? Around neutral with both of those categories. When you see somebody returning to their identity, that is something that's encouraging, right? Whereas if somebody's, just kind of thrown it away of late, kind of going through one of those ebbs and flows, but historically has been playing better, you can kind of throw that aside, right? You don't have to take that as seriously, right? So just understand that these frame points, you have to take the whole picture into mind. You can't just bog yourself down in one thing. Because I know some people just always do things in the last 24 measured rounds, and they'll only look at course history over that time. They'll just look at, somebody's shots gain profile over the last 24 measured rounds and try and match it up to a golf course. Of course, they'll use that for their recent form, and all the numbers they run will be for those 24 measured rounds. That's not the way to do your analysis. I just think that's a little bit too simple, right? And you want to keep it simple, right? You want to make sure that you're not being over, paralysis by analysis isn't happening. You want to make sure that you're not overthinking things. But you have to do enough thought at the same time, right? There's a nice even ground there that you want to stand on. We'll catch up on chat. Looks like there's a few comments down there. And then, of course, if there's any questions, right? We're getting through the top end guys here. Make sure to go ahead and throw them down below. Nick Mars says, do we grade Hoagie more on recent performance or course comp and iron play? So for me, it's a mixture of both. Kind of like I was just saying, I think it's a great segue, Nick, is Hoagie. Let's take a look at his specific stats, right? So let's just do it as a case study to show you guys exactly what I was just talking about here. So if we take a look at the last 24 measured rounds for Hoagie, and I love him this week, he will be in the player pool. You can see that he's gaining a ton on approach, right? Gaining a third of a stroke per round there. He's gaining off the tee, around the green and putting. Hasn't been his strong suit over the last 24 measured rounds. But if we take a look at the last 50 measured rounds, that holds up, right? He's gaining 2/3 of a stroke on approach per round. So he's actually been a little bit worse of late. Off the tee, he's still been there. He's still been inconsistent with the short game, right? He's been a little bit better historically around the green than what we've seen over the last 24 measured rounds. So if we just grade him on the last 24 measured rounds, he'll be a solid play, right? Because he's gaining in 3 out of the 4 major categories. Putting isn't the end-all, be-all this week. I would like guys to be solid with their putter, but particularly for guys in the 7K range, it's not going to make them out of my player pool. In fact, because of how good he's been hitting the ball at the ball striking, he's one of my favorite plays in this range. So to answer your question there, I'm using both frames, right? I'm looking at the last 24 and the last 50 measured rounds for Hoagie, and both of them are positive. Of course, the longer term stuff a little bit more positive than the last 24 measured rounds, but it's not like even in this quote unquote rough stretch for Hoagie, which I think is just I think we're giving him a little bit too much. I think we're holding it against him too much, right? For having pretty decent performances, right? So if we take a look at the recent form here, you can see a 58th for Hoagie, right? 2 months ago, if the guy was making, sorry, that's the match play, completely ignore that. Made the cut at the Masters, right? If 2-3 months ago I told you Tom Hoagie was going out there and making a cut at like $7,000, you'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. I'd be okay with that for the week, right? 33rd at the Players, 32nd at the API. These are relatively difficult fields. You'd be pretty happy with that, right? But now after the win at Pebble Beach, after some of those top 5 finishes where he was really lighting up, now we're disappointed, right? But now he's down here at $7,600 again, priced around guys like Ian Poulter. Priced around guys like Brian Harmon, for goodness sakes. I'd be okay with a top 25 finish, right? That's not going to win you a GPP, right? But if you're playing him in a 2 to 3 max, a single entry, that type of build, he's one of my favorite plays on the slate for that reason. And it's specifically in those type of contests because he is very consistent with that ball striking. So yeah, long-winded answer there, but I'm taking a look at both, and both are relatively favorable for him. So no matter what we're looking at there, it works out. Mr. Waking Up says, is Tringali a sneaky pivot given he's gained on approach in each of his recent weeks? Completely agree. So I actually wrote him up this week as one of my value picks, and it was for that exact reason, right? He's not been having the best finishes of late, but the approach play has still been there. So let's go ahead and take a look at Tringali. He's down here at $7,000, I believe. Yes, he's gaining half a stroke per round in that category. Off the tee has been horrible. He's been bleeding strokes in that category. He's still gaining around the green. You'd expect that. He's a relatively stout up and down player. The putting hasn't been there either. Now, the putting can be a little bit inconsistent for Tringali. He goes through stretches where he'll gain in bunches, go through stretches where he's losing in bunches like he is right now. But around the green, but off the tee play this week shouldn't really matter, right? Distance here doesn't matter. It's only 7,200 yards. A lot of guys are going to be clubbing down off the tee. And for him, that really plays into his skill set because he can lean into the approach play. He can get up and down when he needs to at these really small greens. And as long as he can be around a neutral putter, that's a top 25 finish because this off the tee play isn't going to kill him nearly as much as it would at other golf tournaments. It's also why I like guys down here at like $6,400. What is he? $6,300? Like Luke Donald. That's losing a ton of strokes off the tee, half a stroke per round, right? The reason why I like him is he's going to get away with that because he's getting a ton of strokes on him approach. So I completely agree with you there. I think that he's going to be relatively sneaky. And in terms of my latest ownership projections, I have him there at 4% owned right now. And that is accounting for the fact that I've ridden him up. I've talked about him in my player poll, all that kind of stuff. He's not going to be very highly owned. So definitely think he'll be a sneaky play. And in terms of a pivot off of anyone, I don't know if there's going to be any chalk in that range. Highest owned guy I have right now is Aaron Wise at 6.4%. This off to someone like the EVR, maybe JJ Spawn chalk, but they're only 8-9% owned. He's at least a low owned play that you can definitely differentiate yourself with because this 4% number might even be a little bit high. Might come in closer to 2, maybe even 1.5% because of some of that recent form. Let's go ahead and catch up on a few of the other questions. Mr. Waking Up also says Berger looks to be low owned. His last 3 down weeks have been due to bad weather. Has said he likes this course fit. Yeah, I saw that too. I saw the interview. I saw that after I was already all in on Daniel Berger. After I already put in the outright bet on him, playing him in Prize Picks, DraftKings this week, everything like that, and I just cemented it. Now, I have 50% ownership with somebody like a Daniel Berger. I have 2 outright bets on DB this week. I'm all in on the guy this week. And when he said that, completely agreed, Mr. Waking Up. That's definitely a really good sign. When you hear guys that have confidence going into the week, when the stats also back that up, right? When he's, very accurate off the tee, able to lean into that approach play, everything is looking up for him this week. And of course, sometimes those guys end up disappointing, but just in terms of the positive EV long-term, I definitely think this is a great spot for him. Mr. Waking Up says Hadwin could be the fade to make because of poor history. I agree. I'll be fading him. I talked about him during my fades video as well. So it looks like we're in lockstep here, Mr. Waking Up, to be honest with you. Looks like we have a lot of the same takes here. And the course history, you nailed it on the head. That was the main thing for me. Also, he's not going to finish top 10 every single week. We know the type of player that he is, right? Long term, we know that he's, a top 25 machine, but he's not a top 10 machine. Miscut, 41st, 48th finish, 22nd there in 2017. I'm fading him this week. You can see I have him down there, bold red as a fade, 23.1% ownership too. Just pretty outrageous numbers right there. Not somebody that I'm going to be forcing into my player pool, that's for sure. All right, let's go ahead and continue down here with the chat. Catch Me If You Can says, got in late. Every tout are playing the same guys. Never seen it this big. I have not seen any of the other content pieces out here this week. If I'm in lockstep with other people, I guess everyone's kind of trying to take, the guys that are accurate off the tee, very good on approach. It makes sense, right? The guys that are doing research this week should have some success. So I'm not going to change my plays because other people are also taking the same guys, but that's interesting. Usually I'm a little bit contrarian based to other people because I do my approach a lot differently than a lot of other people out there. And if we're in the same type of boat this week, that's just interesting. I don't think I've seen that for quite some time. We'll definitely say that. Derek is down there in chat. What is going on, dude? And Nick says, should I fade Connors? Seems like he will be tired given he's played a lot of golf. Any good pivots that you see? So for me, I actually don't have him in my player pool. So, we need to talk about some of these other guys in this range. We just talked about Daniel Berger. We're going to talk about some of the other guys in this lower 9K range here. Corey Connors I have down as a no, just mostly because of the upside. This guy's a top 25 machine. When he finishes in the top 10, that's the outlier for him. When he won the Valero Texas Open, he broke through. I think a lot of people expected the world from him, thought he was a world beater, a proven winner, that type of thing. That just hasn't been the type of player that he's been over the last 2 years, right? Over a longer sample size. Somebody who's, again, finishing top 25 all the time and not necessarily winning golf tournaments. Now of late, he's been a little bit better than most, right? He started to kind of have some of those top finishes. Last year at the RBC Heritage, he finished 4th here. So I understand why he's getting a ton of steam. He had 6th place at the Masters, right? 3rd at the match play, which I don't know if you really want to count that as a top 10 finish. It's a little bit of a different format event, but 35th at Valero, right? 26th at the Players Championship. Even 11th at the API, right, is a ceiling performance for Corey Connors. If you take it more of a zooming out, it's more of the 30th, 20th place finishes, which for DFS isn't really going to mean all that much, right? That's why I have him down as a cash play. I'd even consider playing him in 2 to 3 maxes. Now, he's not in my 2 to 3 maxes this week. Just guys I prefer a little bit more than a Corey Connors. But the main pivot to answer your question here would be Daniel Berger. You go to somebody like a Matt Fitzpatrick if you wanted to as well. If you had the extra money, the $100, you could also go up to a Shane Lowry. The pivots off of Corey Connors are so strong this week that if you can find any reason to fade these guys up top, for me with JT, you're just picking straws up top. Guys with Cameron Smith, who I guess I didn't touch on here. I guess we should. It's the driving accuracy, right? He was duck hooking everything to the left there on Sunday. And now I know it could be a quick fix. He has the 3 days in between the tournaments to go ahead and kind of reset that golf swing. But I don't want somebody up top that is struggling with their swing, right? I'd much rather go to the guys that looked good last week, that are also decent course fits, relatively similar shots gain profiles. So that's why I'm not playing Corey Connors. That's why I'm not playing Cameron Smith this week. And also why I'm not playing Justin Thomas. He's one of my favorite players in the world. And if I'm not playing Justin Thomas, you certainly, you know he's probably not the best play because I love the guy. He's one of my top 3 favorite players on tour. Same thing with Jordan Spieth down here, who also isn't in my player pool this week. When I'm fading guys like JT and Jordan Spieth, you know it's not a good situation for them. Just know that, because I'll find any reason I can to play those guys. And I mean that. And I always say that when I'm playing them. I always, talk about that when I'm touting those guys, because my fan allegiance does get in the way with those guys at times. I'll play them a lot more than I have to. I've lost a lot of money playing them, but I can't root against them. I have a hard time doing it. But this week I am. I am playing against them this week because it doesn't look like a very good situation for them. Kishmi McKinn says not you, so okay, makes sense. So yeah, I haven't looked at any of their content, so I had no idea if I was, in a similar boat as them, but that doesn't surprise me. I take a little bit of a different approach. I'm not somebody who watches other content and then tries to make mine and cater it around it. I follow my numbers and try to stick to it like I can. It's interesting. So if I had to guess who they're on, I'm guessing a ton of people are playing Colin Morikawa. I'm assuming that's going to be an extremely popular pick this week. Seems like a lot of people are probably talking about Shane Lowry, probably Corey Connors. I know a lot of people are picking Corey Connors to end up winning this golf tournament. And it seems like down here in this 8K range, a ton of people are talking about Russell Henley, which makes sense. Again, the shots gained metrics are great. We're going to talk about him here in a second. Just doesn't really have that top 5 upside. The guy never wins golf tournaments. The guy never really is there by the end on Sunday. Just makes it look pretty for the first 2 to 3 days. And then the mental thing gets in the way. So, and those are going to be popular plays, right? And that's where the ownership's at, right? 21% Colin. A lot of ownership went on to Shane Lowry over the week, which was surprising to me. I thought he was going to be lower owned. And then Russell Henley, 20.8%. That's getting brutal there. That's getting to a point where I just can't stomach it. And that's why he's not in the player pool. Let's see if there are any other questions. And Jordan says, why no on Sanjay? I can't play everyone here. So he's a similar situation to a Justin Thomas. Maybe a little bit more accurate would be to have him down as a blank, because I completely understand the play, but he's 14.8% owned, which means to get leverage, I'm going to have 25, 30% of them. And I like Matt Fitzpatrick and Daniel Berger a whole lot more. First off, in terms of long-term pedigree, it isn't relatively close. Both of these guys are better plays. This is Matt Fitzpatrick's favorite golf course in the world. He said that on tour. He said that again this week. He's coming in with insanely good form. He's my number 5 player in the field. And then Daniel Berger, I already said, is my favorite play on the slate, right? So if I'm going to get leverage on both of these plays, if I'm going to try and take somebody like a Joaquin Niemann, who I do like more than Sanjay M, just the approach play for Joaquin Niemann's a little bit more consistent. Also, the putter for Joaquin Niemann can really get hot, which is what I like. And he's coming in at the same type of ownership and a cheaper price. I can't play both of them, right? So for me, if I like Joaquin Niemann just a little bit more, that's why he's down as a no. So like I said, maybe having him down as a blank is perhaps a little bit more accurate, just to give you my sentiment on him. He's not somebody I'm avoiding, like actively avoiding, right? He's just kind of somebody I have to avoid. Because even if you're playing 150 lineups, if you're trying to get adequate leverage on enough people in the field, you just can't play everyone, right? You're going to have to pick your spots. And he's one of the guys that, unfortunately, I am not fitting into the player pool. We'll talk about Jordan Spieth. The ball striking is completely all over the place. You guys saw it at the Masters. You would have seen it the weeks coming into the Masters. The only bet on him last week, the reason why I played him in my player pool, I wasn't huge on him. I had like 20% last week, is he turns it around at the Masters. Right? He's come into the Masters with bad form before and then finished top 5. So that definitely was in the realm of possibilities. But if he couldn't turn it around at the Masters, do not expect it to happen here at the RBC Heritage. So I think we're going to see signs of him coming back before you really want to jump aboard the Jordan Spieth train. But he could be in the $8,000 range soon, and also could still be in the single-digit owned range when he gets there in the next month, maybe month and a half, something like that. So I'm going to be waiting here on Jordan Spieth. When he starts to get really cheap, starts to be criminally low owned, then I'll start taking shots on Jordan Spieth, because he does have the ability to bounce back. We've seen that. And it doesn't seem like he's all that far off. He's doing something with trying to shallow out his swing. He did it a year and a half ago, and that's actually what made him get a lot better. That's what took him from being kind of, inconsistent, make a cut every once in a while, to winning, posting all those top 5 finishes. He was doing that same wacky stuff with trying to shallow out his swing. He'd been doing it for 2 to 3 months, and it looked horrible. He was missing a bunch of cuts. It actually got worse before it got better, but then he broke through. And you can kind of see it coming, right? So like I'm saying, he's going to leave these breadcrumbs before he comes out there. He's going to start to improve. You're going to see it week after week, and then you jump on the Jordan Spieth train. That is not happening right now. So as somebody that follows him probably more than anybody else in the world, particularly from the stats perspective, somebody I'm out on. And like I said, if I'm out on him and JT, probably means to steer clear. I'm pretty good at fading those guys. Joaquin Niemann, already said I really like him there. Russell Henley will have the conversation. I hate him and Corey Connors for this only one reason is their stats lie. They make them look like gods here in the PGA Tour, yet they hardly ever finish in the top 5 or actually win golf tournaments, right? If you just look at the shots gain metrics, you'd swear that these are Hall of Fame level players, right? They're gaining, nearly a stroke per round in the category, right? 0.94 shots per round, shots gained approach for a Russell Henley. Up here with Corey Connors, he's gaining over a stroke per round with his ball striking per round. Just video game type of numbers. And this is over a large sample size. This is over 2 to 3 month sample size at the very least for these players, if not longer. You would expect them to be literal Hall of Fame level players, and they're not because their mental game isn't there. They're not closers. And when you're taking guys that are $9,000 plus in DFS, maybe a little bit less so with Russell Henley than with somebody like Corey Connors, you get them to win the golf tournament or at the very least finish in the top 3. And for Corey Connors to finish in the top 3, I can't even think, he hasn't done it more than 3-4 times in the last year. He's had a lot of top 10s. He's had quite a few top 25s, right? But in a large field GPP contest, which is, what this in general tab is really meant for, also this 150 max pool tab over here, he's not somebody that I'm looking to get to. So just, he's that same type of player as a Russell Henley down here. Russell Henley's more of a choke artist. We saw it at the Sony Open. That was hard to watch, to be quite honest with you. But he's done that time and time again. So, if he gets into contention, right, I wouldn't even be sweating it if we're full fading him this week. I would expect him to come back to the field. That's no shade at Russell Henley. He's still, printing money out there, making a ton of money out there, respectable player and whatnot. But when he gets out there to elite after day one, I'm not going to be sweating it. He's coming back to the field because he always does. That's just unfortunately what he does. And that's not going to change. He's done that for 10 years now. This isn't like a 6 months type of thing for Russell Henley. Webb Simpson here, $8,800. I think he's starting to get healthy, and a healthy Webb Simpson at one of his happy places is a scary sight for the rest of the field. So it surprises me that he's 11% owned because last year he was nearly $10,500 and he was 25% owned at this event. So I think we're getting a value there, particularly because he did look healthy at the Masters. And from everything he tells us, he's healthy. He's letting us know, in all of his pressers, I feel good. The swing's starting to get here. No mention of the injuries, right? No mention of any pain or anything that's holding him back, which really means that he's a green light ahead, at least in my book there for Webb Simpson. Billy Horschel, he's somebody I've backed on the channel quite a bit of late. I'm starting to get a little bit of, maybe buyer fatigue, with Billy Horschel because he hasn't had those flashy finishes. But I think he's close, right? The shots gained metrics are just really positive for a Billy Horschel. Just to give you an idea what I'm looking at here, gaining nearly half a stroke per round on approach, a third of a stroke per round off the tee. The putter is always going to be a huge bright spot for him. And I know off the tee isn't a huge deal this week, but he's also really precise off the tee, right? He gains a majority of his strokes by being accurate. So he can plot himself around with the approach play, lean into that putter. I expect him to be a relatively high floor play, but also high upside play. We've seen him have that upside over the last 4 to 5 months, particularly with the shots gained measures, just consistently improving. And I do think a win is coming soon for Billy Horschel. Trailhand's a core play for us. Now, I can't talk about everyone in the field, right? We're going to start skipping around here a little bit, but I love Trailhand. I talked about him during the core picks video. I like the course because he's not the best off the tee, right? And off the tee here, we can kind of give players a little bit of a pass for. So it's $7,600. He's been right around neutral for the last 24 measured rounds. The longer term sample size, a little bit worse, actually. It's where he starts to lose to the field. So right around 13/100ths of a stroke loss per round. The approach play right around neutral. But of course, always a solid putter. Always really good with the short game. So it's going to come down to the approach play for Terrell. But if he can go out there, gain 2 to 3 strokes to the field, that might be enough to top 3 or maybe even win this event because he can get nuclear hot with that putter. He can get 2 to 3 strokes very easily with the around the green play. He has a knack for chipping the ball in. So I do like his upside, and I like the price tag. I think he's much cheaper than he should be at $8,600. Particularly if we take a look at some of the other got names in this range, like Siwoo Kim, especially Harold Varner III. The fact that he's only $100 more than HV3. I like my guy HV3. I play him a whole lot here. Numbers actually look pretty good for HV3 this week. Just a little bit disrespectful to my guy Han. Han's was a top 10 player in the world there at one point. So Put some respect on my guy's name. Let's move down here a little bit further. I'm probably going to have to grab a sip of water here in a second. My throat is getting extremely dry here. Nick Moore says, Marty Fitz is getting picked a lot. I'm assuming you mean Matt Fitzpatrick. Yeah, he's getting picked a lot because of a lot of the sentiment coming out from his interviews where he said, like, it's my favorite golf course. All of the shots gained metrics from are gaining right now. So you can't find a fault in his game. I think that's why he's popular. And I get it. Nearly a third of his stroke gained per round in every category. I mean, like, you literally can't find a fault in his game, right? So that's why he's popular, because when you go to try and fade Matt Fitzpatrick, it's like, what are you going to say about his game that makes you want to fade him, right? Other than the ownership, which is, as of right now, I have at 19.8%. He's not the highest owned guy in this range. That would actually go there to a Russell Henley. Let's see. Colin Morikawa. I do need to get that water. I'm going to get it in a second. You can tell my throat is extremely dry. But yeah, he's popular, right? But it's like, what are we going to use to substantiate the fade? Like, what reasoning are we going to go with there? And if you can find something, then by all means go with it, right? But when I have a hard time finding that reason to fade someone, I usually eat the chalk. So that's why I'm eating the chalk with Colin Morikawa at $10,200, for example, right? Just a perfect course fit, right? He's super highly owned, right? I hate that for players, right? I'm always somebody, to go out there and recommend fading people that are far too popular for my liking. And I can't do it with either player. So I get it, I guess. Just he's going to be in my player pool. It doesn't make me feel very good, right? Because I have to allocate more of my lineups to get leverage there. But yeah, he's getting picked a lot. I guess I understand it. Jordan P says, deep dive on Hostler when I get to that range. Absolutely. I'll make sure to go ahead and do that. He's an interesting name this week. I'm probably not going to have him, but we'll do a deep dive on him. Maybe I'll talk myself into him when we get there. We'll go ahead and see. But yeah, I'll do a deep dive for sure. All right, let's talk about a few other guys here. Tommy Fleetwood's a fade just because the shots gained metrics, they look very much so unsustainable, I think is the best word to put it. He's gaining off the tee, but he's losing a ton of strokes on approach. If you go over here to the putter, you see he's just gaining a ton of strokes to the putter and around the green, right? So he's not really making his hay off the tee, right? It's just a quarter of a stroke per round, losing on approach. So with his quote unquote ball striking, he's gaining right around, 17 100ths of a stroke per round, right? Just slightly above tour average. And then gaining all of his hay, like what he's really popping in all of your bottles with this week, is the short game. And that can be extremely volatile. So just know what you're getting if you're taking a Tommy Fleetwood. He's just as likely to miss the cut this week as he is to go out there and finish in the top 25. His range of outcomes are extremely wide. He's somebody who is one of the most volatile players in this field because of his shots gained profile. So just keep that in mind if you're going to play him. You can see the ownership actually came down on him. It was closer to 15, 18% at a few places actually earlier in the week. So at $8,200, I think the price is decent. That's why a lot of the ownership was getting there. And I wouldn't be surprised if it was higher owned than 12%, especially with some of the casuals. I mean, just look at some of the name recognition here. For some of the casuals that are playing after the Masters, keeping some of their player pool, I should say, some of their bankroll over there on the golf side of things, I think a lot of them are going to go to somebody like a Tommy Fleetwood. Let's talk about Alex Noren, who has been playing some unbelievable golf, even over the last 50 measured rounds. So we give him a huge sample size here. He's gaining in every single shots gained category. Over the last 24 measured rounds, it's a similar story. In fact, the same story. He's gaining in all four major categories, over 0.6 of a stroke per round on approach. But usually the putter is what's carrying him. Usually he's gaining a ton of strokes of the putter, but it's been the ball striking. And that's what I love about Alex Noren. He's somebody who also feels like a win is coming soon. And it's been a long-term thing and a short-term thing for an Alex Noren. So just a lot of positive signs for him going forward. Kevin Kisner just loves this place. He's had a ton of success at Harbour Town. Makes sense from a logic standpoint when you consider the type of game that Kevin Kisner has. More of a plotter, a lot more precise than he is a bomber. And that's what we're looking for here. Same thing with Chris Kirk, who I talked about in the sleeper pick video. Have no idea how this guy is as low owned as he is. Just a perfect course fit here. He was chalked down there in the Florida swing. And if anything, the RBC Heritage here at Hilton Head, this is an even better course fit than PGA National, than the API, where he was owned 25%, and also where he was more expensive for a tournament like the PGA, for the Honda Classic. Just, I absolutely love him here. I think he's definitely coming in lower owned than he should be. Jason Kochrack has won at multiple of my comp courses here. So He's really showing up because of that comp course analysis. That's why his points per dollar is so high. That's why his projection is so much higher than a lot of these other players. A lot of that is just baked into my projections, and just somebody, I do a lot of work when it comes to my correlation analysis, right? When I'm actually trying to figure out what golf courses I do the last 5 years correlate to success with other golf courses. And, I run correlation for each golf course against the other 30 that I have on tour in my database. And one of the strongest correlations that I had was between Colonial and then this golf course. Of any of the golf courses with any of the other golf courses on tour, it was one of the highest correlated combinations. So when we get to Colonial, we're going to talk about Harbour Town. It's going to be my number one correlated course. And here it's the same thing with vice versa. I put a lot of stock into that because it's over time, I've had a lot of success doing that type of analysis. And just being an engineer, somebody that's an electrical engineer by trade, that's really my type of thing, right? He's running the numbers, trying to do predictive analysis, this time for golf, right? Rather than doing things in the engineering field. So I put a lot more confidence into those models than a lot of other people do. Just because I'm a numbers guy, right? That's my forte there. So I'm going to try and be early on Jason Kochrack having success here. And just from an eye test, right? He's been good at some of these other short tracks where you have to be precise off the tee. So I think there's something there with Jason Kochrack this week, even though he's going over to the Saudi League, taking that blood money. Ryan Harmon at $7,700, perfect course fit, more of a plotter, really good with that approach play, and finally returning to form. At one point was just completely bleeding strokes across the board, but back to gaining off the tee, gaining with the approach, and gaining across the board. So across all 4 major statistical categories, which is what we're looking for here. Again, more of a well-rounded player, not looking for those bombers, just more of the guys that can get it done across the board. And he certainly fits that bill for us. We'll catch up on chat down here. It looks like, and we're still going to talk about Beau Hossler. We go ahead and remind myself there. He's right below there. Chris Palmer says, Damon or Lanto in cash head-to-head. They're both $6,800. Love both of the plays this week, but I would go with Lanto Griffin. Just from a skill set perspective, I slightly prefer him over Damon, but love both plays for sure. I have both in my cash pool this week. Both of them are going to be key parts of that cash pool. Let's talk about Beau Hossler here, though. So where's he at? Beau Hossler, $6,400, right? Maybe he's a little bit cheaper. Hey, I do have him here. $6,800, a little bit cheaper than I expected, actually. Okay. All right. So we have Beau Hossler down here at $6,800. You can see per my modeling. Recent form, he's decent, right? Top 26 because of some of those top 25 finishes. Pebble Beach, that top 5 finish is really giving him a lot of credit there. Harbour Town fits a little bit of a longer term sample size, trying to match up his skill set to this golf course. He's number 45 in the field, which still good value here at $6,800. Here's the issue, right? If we take a look at the recent form for Beau Hossler, so go down here to $6,800, and maybe I'll talk myself into it, right? He looked really good at the Valero Texas Open, but miscut 20th. Before that, the Honda Classic, I forget what he finished. But he had a few rough performances after Pebble Beach, right? So, he had that really big high there where he almost ended up winning that golf tournament. Tom Hoagie took it from him. A few decent performances like the API there, and then finally spiked again at the Valero Texas Open. And I played him at the Valero Texas Open. I was able to take advantage of that. The unfortunate part is that he's been that very inconsistent player, right? So I understand going to him. I may actually put him in my player pool. As of right now, I have him down as a blank. You know what? Yeah, I'm going to put that down as a yes, just because he has an upside, right? And this is just for a per GPP perspective. He has the upside, right? We know that it's in his range of outcomes, and I only have him at 2.5% ownership. Now, earlier in the week, I expected that to be like 5 or 6% because in terms of name recognition, in terms of recent form, he's head and shoulders better than the other players in this field, right? Scott Stallings might have something to say about that. Pan Kazire as well. Maybe even somebody like a Brent Seneca who looked so good tee to green last week. But he's only 2.5% owned. And this is as of an hour before the stream. This is something that I ran at around 6 p.m. Eastern time. So he's extremely accurate, completely up to date. He's only 2.5%. So that's really the deciding factor there. We're going to talk about these guys in the 6K range, but it's all about upside. It's all about whether they have the ability to actually finish in the top 5, because there's at least 50, maybe even 60 players out of the 132 that we have in this field that aren't capable of doing that. That even if they have their best stuff, aren't going to finish in the top 5 of this field, especially given the 400 strength of field that this field has, which is much higher than the RBC Heritage typically has. So just keep that in mind when we get down there a little bit later. Where did I leave off at? I believe it was here at Brian Harmon. So let's go ahead and talk about Mito after we catch up on chats. Looks like we have Catch Me If You Can down here. Says, sorry if I missed. No course history, but what do you think on Mito? So we're going to talk about him right now. Perfect timing. So Mito Pereira, I don't have in my player pool as of right now, just because from a logic standpoint, I'm not sure if this is the course for him. And you guys know I'm a Mito Pereira guy. Like he's one of my favorite players on tour. He's not in that top 3 yet. He's in the top 10 of my favorite players on tour. He's got to win first. When he gets that win, maybe he cracks that top 3, but it's going to happen this year. You know, that's really what I've been saying about Mito Pereira. My metrics absolutely love the guy, and it's at pretty much any golf course. I mean, even running the metrics here for Harbour Town, he's still a top 15 course fit. That's just how good he is playing. That's just how good the shots gained metrics are for Mito Pereira. And maybe he's the next Corey Connors. Maybe he's the next Russell Henley, who the shots gained metrics just tell a completely different story than reality. But also he's much cheaper, and also he's much lower owned, right, than those players, right? Where he's not getting that type of credit than those other players are. So I'm still willing to buy in on somebody like Mito Pereira. I have him down as a blank right now, so I'm not sure he's going to make my pull. The real just question mark is the skill set, right? This is a course where you can't lean into that driver. He's a very solid driver, hits it out there 310, 320 yards. So he's not going to be able to take advantage of that this week. And he's not the best around the green player. He's not the best at getting up and down. We've seen that from time to time. So at a course that rewards short game, right, where we're looking for those plotters, those precise players a little bit more than we are the power game, I'd rather save him for an easier power game type of golf course. So that's my take on Mito Pereira. I, of course, just long-term extremely bullish on him. If he wins this week, I'm going to be pretty pissed. I'll just say that, because if it's the one week I don't play him and he actually goes out there and wins the golf tournament, I'm going to be happy for the guy, right? He's one of my favorite players on tour, you know, much like a Jordan Spieth or Justin Thomas. Just would be unfortunate timing for me. Let's just say that. Move down a little bit further. Pro Reactor says Kirk gaining steam. Yeah, I had him at 8.9% before. I have him at 9.9% right now. So I don't think it's all that much steam. Still somebody I'm definitely trying to get leverage to. Sam Ergo says Berger, Lowry, or Henley for upside. I'd definitely go Berger there. He's my favorite play on the slate. And Nick Mars says, did Maverick McNeely make my player pool? So yeah, we skipped over him earlier. I guess probably somebody I probably should have stopped to talk about, because he is a really solid player. He's not in my player pool. I have him down as a blank, but he's down as a blank because it's just by opportunity, right? I can't play everyone in this range. Jason Kochrack, because of those comp courses, I really do like Chris Kirk. He's one of my favorite plays on the slate. Kevin Kisner with his course history, really like Kevin Na. So I just can't play everyone out of these, 4 to 5 players consecutively on the board. So more of just an opportunity costing than anything. He is still getting attention there. Right? He's 11.1% owned. So not like he's being completely overlooked by the masses or anything like that. I'm actually going to go snag a sip of water. So I'll be back in about 10 seconds. And then we're going to go ahead and continue here with the mid 7K range. Of course, talk about the 6K range, and then get into some of the strategy here for this week, including making some lineups. So be back in 10 seconds. All right, much better. When you're talking for 45 minutes straight, you want to make sure that you have a water next to you. So if any of you are doing podcasts out there, making YouTube videos, anything like that, pro tip for sure. You definitely want to have the water next to you. You don't want to remember 2 seconds after you start recording. That's for sure. Alrighty. Cool. So let's go ahead and continue here with the 7K range. Probably the most important range when it comes to DFS, because it's the largest range, and plenty of ownership goes to the 7K range. Let's say that you're probably going to have at least 1 to 2 of these guys in pretty much every lineup you make. Whereas with the 10, 9K range, even the 8K range, really going to have 1 to 2 at a max in a lineup. Sometimes you'll have 3 to 4 guys here in the 7K range in a lineup. So you certainly want to make sure that you're hunkering down on it with your analysis. Already talked about Adam Hadwin as a fade. The course history is really what I'm worried about there for Adam Hadwin. We talked about Tom Hoagie as well. Really do like the ball striking. especially in some of these single entry 2 to 3 maxes. I think Tom Hoagie's a much better play in there. Ian Poulter hasn't showed any form, so the course history has actually been at least adequate here. He's also been at these plotter type of golf courses pretty successful over the years. Pete Dye golf courses also pretty successful. That's from a long-term perspective. He looks pretty good, but of course, if you look at any of these recent metrics, Ian Poulter's not playing very well. Kevin Streelman's in good recent form. Somebody who at $7,500, I think is an excellent pivot off of Adam Hadwin at just $100 cheaper. The recent form has been there. So if we take a look at wrong tab there, Adam Hadwin, Kevin Streelman, you'll see that 18th, a 7th, a 22nd place finish, and then miscut there 4 starts ago for the API. It's not super sexy, right? It's not the 4th, 7th, and 8th that you had with an Adam Hadwin, but it's good enough to give us at least a little bit of encouragement, right? To give us something to go off of there, particularly because he's gaining a ton of strokes off the tee. He's gaining a ton of strokes around the green and gaining with the putter, which can be a little bit inconsistent for a Kevin Streelman. Now, the approach play hasn't been all that great. So the fact that he's even put up these finishes with the approach play being hairy, which is usually what Kevin Streelman can rely on. If you take a look at the long-term sample size for Streelman, the approach play has been much better than what we've seen over the last 24, even the last 50 measured rounds. It's a surprise that he was able to even top 10 at the Valspar Championship. So if he can turn around the approach play, which again, historically has been really solid for Streelman, he's going to have a high upside. He could potentially even top 5 or top 10 here. So I do like him at $7,500, still standing by that core pick there. Troy Merritt at $7,400. He's almost the same player as an Adam Hadwin in terms of their skill set. From a long-term perspective, they're going to do pretty much the same type of thing. So if he's going to be 23% owned and somebody like Troy Merritt is going to be 5% owned, I'd much rather go that way. EVR, just a much better player than his peers here. So in terms of pedigree, a much better player, but from the skill set perspective, not my favorite player, right? He's more of a bomber. He's extremely inaccurate off the tee, but I'm willing to give him a pass there because he's only $7,300. Russell Knox is a really solid play. He's probably my favorite value pick on the board. Somebody I've already bet outright at 95-1. I like the accuracy off the tee. I love the approach play, and I've been beating the drum on the guy for quite some time now. When he goes out there and he's able to gain a few strokes with the putter, maybe 3.5 strokes over the 4 rounds, he's going to win an event. So I'm just waiting for that to happen. Going to keep plugging in bets on Russell Knox when it makes sense from a value perspective. Sepp Straka seems to be forgotten after his win at the Honda Classic, but he's still playing some really solid golf, gaining a ton of strokes with the putter. So if we take a look at this, he's gaining nearly 9/10 of a stroke per round with the flat stick. Still gaining off the tee. Now, the approach play has kind of gone away ever since that Honda Classic win, but if he can tap back into that, really do like his upside here this week. And he's only $7,200, also only 6% owned. So it seems like the public has kind of cooled on Straka ever since that win. He was relatively high owned for the last 2 to 3 weeks. Aaron Wise is being completely forgotten about, only 6.4% owned at $7,100. While he's not going to be able to hit the ball a long way off the tee, right? He's typically a very strong off the tee player, both long and accurate. When he's still getting it out there with a 3-wood, about 280, 290 yards, hitting pretty much every single fairway, that's still going to pay him a lot of dividends, right? He's going to be able to lay up a lot more than a lot of his peers, and I expect him to hit a ton of fairways as a result, and to be able to lean into that approach play, which is almost just as good as the off the tee play is for Wise. Arnaban Lahiri is on to something. He's really cooking it up with the approach play right now, and if he continues that, the short game is always going to be really good for Arnaban. So I definitely like what I'm seeing there. Pan Kazire is looking really solid with the approach play. He's been talked about on this channel quite a bit over the last month, but gaining over half a stroke per round in that category. And off the tee, which has been his worst category, shouldn't be that much of an issue this week with all the layups and, of course, a relatively short golf course. CT Pan has won here before. He's also a relatively good course fit, more of a plotter than he is a distance guy. And the recent form hasn't been amazing, but it hasn't been all that horrible either. So if we take a look at it, he's still gaining on approach, still gaining around the green. Now, definitely has to be a better putter, but of course, when he won here and a lot of his other performances here at Harbour Town, he's gained strokes on these greens. So definitely a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. I know we talked about Tringali before, so I won't do it again, but I do like him this week, even though He's one of my least favorite players on the PGA Tour. Davis Riley is a high upside play. It seems like the public is starting to cool on him after his really solid performance at the Valspar. But in terms of course fit, his worst shots gained category is going to be off the tee. He's decent with the approach play, going to gain in that category. Also a relatively good short game player. That fits this golf course very well. So I like him there at $7,000. Scott Stallings, recent form has been really solid for him. So certainly somebody I'm going to there. Carlos Ortiz has some upside, but he's not in the player pool as of right now. If I can fit him in later, I will. Mackenzie Hughes, we'll talk about at $6,900. So his shots gained putting numbers on POA, which is the surface for this week. We do have a POA Trivalous Overseed, which is the dominant surface that we'll be having at Harbour Town this time of year. It wasn't there in June and over in 2020 with Webb Simpson won, but he's a really solid putter on that surface. He's more of a plotter than anything. The shots gained metrics over the last 24 measured rounds, I don't believe they're anything special for him. Yeah, he's like losing across the board except for the putter, which is pretty much what he always looks like. And you can see that leads to him being just a slight negative to the field in terms of shots gained. If you take a look at the last 50 measured rounds, I believe it's a little bit better. I mean, he's just slowly but surely gone better here on tour, and he pops from time to time. So you can see gaining with the putter, actually even a little bit more so, gaining around the green. Still losing off the tee on approach, which is going to be his shots gained profile, but he still pops from time to time. So even though it's been like this for quite some time, you've seen those performances where he finishes in the top 25 at major championships. He sniffed the top 5 for a few times there at the U.S. Open. What was the other one? Maybe it was both U.S. Opens. It was back-to-back U.S. Opens or something like that. When conditions get dicey, which they could here with the weather. I mean, we saw plenty of wind in the forecast there for Mackenzie Hughes. Could get even more attractive. We talked about Beau Hossler there a little bit, kind of talked himself into playing him actually after doing a little bit of a deep dive there. Has some upside, but just a GPP play. I wouldn't be playing him in cash. I wouldn't be playing him in any of your single entry stuff. Just more of a pure upside flyer type of thing. Brent Seneca's ball striking was unbelievable last week. So if he could just flip the putter, which was atrocious, which if you know anything about Brent Seneca's game, that's extremely surprising. I definitely like his upside. Brendan Todd, this is a golf course that is carbon copy perfect for him. Just, relatively short, which plays into his off the tee play. He's one of the most accurate drivers of the golf ball. Pretty solid on approach and really good with the putter. So this is one of the few tracks where Brendan Todd can have plenty of success. Joel Damon and Lanto Griffin are some of my favorite plays on the slate here at $6,800. Lanto Griffin's a core play for me. Joel Damon is a value pick. I'd be playing both in all contests that I'm playing. I'm going to have them in my 150 max, 10 to 15% ownership on both of them. I'll have them in cash. And I'm also going to have them in my single entry. They're going to be 2 of my favorite plays on the slate. Brendan Grace is a past winner here. He's shown some success at these coastal windy tracks, particularly shorter tracks where you have to be a little bit more accurate than long and powerful off the tee. So that does play into his skill set there at $6,700. Now we're really getting down towards the bottom of the board. But because this is a short track and really anyone can win here, right? And I say quote unquote anyone. I don't really mean anyone, but there's certainly a lot more players that are capable of winning the RBC Heritage than most golf tournaments here on the PGA Tour. Guys like Nate Lashley have a shot, right? He's not very long off the tee, but really good with the long irons. He can get hot with the putter from time to time. And when he does, it's typically on POA Anua. So I like him there at $7,100. Alex Smalley at $6,600. He played really good over there at Putacana, over there for the alternate field event when it was super windy, Dominican Republic. So I do like that. Harry Higgs looked really good at the Masters. I kind of called that, right? I told you guys that's a creative golf course, and Harry Higgs is one hell of a creative guy. Same thing with Charles Schwartzel. I called him last week, called him as a value pick. I'm not going to be on Charles, though. I think that because he was in contention over the weekend on the Masters, a ton of people are going to go to him, and perhaps that was just because he loves Augusta National. Of course, a champion there, also finished in 2nd and 3rd place at the Masters. Just not somebody I'm going to. I'd rather go to Higgs, who's also a good course fit here, who's had success at the RBC Heritage. I also do like JT Poston at $6,600. It's one of the few golf courses he can compete at because off the tee play isn't all that big of an issue. Nick Taylor, very similar story. Not very good off the tees, at least accurate off the tee. We can give him that. But more of an approach play specialist, more of a short game specialist. So willing to go that direction. Kramer Hickok, another one of those plotters. Same thing with a Zach Johnson. Guys that I'll have in the player pool. Adam Svenson, talked about him during the value picks, but really good ball striker, just a high upside play down here in the low 6Ks. Doc Redman looked really good at the Players Championship, another Pete Dye design, very similar plotters type of affair. Pat Perez, short golf course, checks that box for him. Satoshi Kodaira, he's had a ton of success here, so I'm willing to go there. Also has looked pretty decent of late. Luke Donald's maybe my sleeper pick of the week here, getting a ton of strokes on approach, and he's bleeding a ton of strokes off the tee, but like we've said a million times now, shouldn't matter all that much for him. Adam Shank's a high upside play at $6,200. Same thing with Hank Lebiota. Neither one's been playing well of late. That's why they're $6,200. But if we take a look at the last 5 to 6 months, they've had a few pot performances, right? They've gone out there, gained a bunch of strokes on the greens from time to time. So that is certainly well within the range of outcomes. And Roger Sloan and Tyler Duncan have been actually a little bit better than those two, right? So while those two are more of a long-term play, Tyler Duncan, Roger Sloan have been a little bit better of late, especially compared to a lot of their other peers down here. So a few other guys that I'm sneaking into lineups that are going to be 0.4 and 0.1% owned respectively. So not many people going there. And that's about it, right? I might consider playing 1 or 2 lineups of Henrik Norlander, 1 or 2 of a Steven Yeager, 1 or 2 of a Brian Gay or a Chesson Hadley. And down at $6,000, if you want to take a pure flyer pick, maybe Jim Herman, right? He's had success at the Wyndham Championship. That's one of my main comp courses for this week. So wouldn't necessarily surprise me if he went out there, made the cut, maybe finished in the top 10 if he had the week of his. He does it once a year, right? Jim Herman goes out there once a year and finishes in the top 10. Maybe this is the golf tournament for him. So maybe in a lineup or 2 for me this week. That would be a max for him for sure. Let's go ahead and catch up on chat. Then we're going to go ahead and talk about some strategy for the week. Chris Palmer says cash head to head. So this is a few decisions here. So it's Noren and Kirk or Henley and Knox. The others would be Lowry, Fitz, Hadwin, and Lanto, who I all like in cash, especially Hadwin, right? I think it makes sense, the recent forms there. So in cash, I'm not trying to avoid that ownership. So it's either Noren or Kirk or Henley and Knox. So the Noren Kirk is a little bit more balanced than the Henley and Knox, right? Henley's a little bit closer to $9,000. I still do really like Russell Knox. Now, I would just say Noren and Kirk because it's a little bit more balanced. Usually when it comes to my cash lineups, I try to be as balanced as humanly possible there. And in terms of Russell Henley's skill set fit, a lot of the shots, gated metrics, I completely get it, but I also do love Noren and love Kirk this week. Whereas I like Henley and I love Knox, right? So I'd rather be able to take 2 guys that I love together. So that's the answer there. I go with the first combination, Chris. Nick Marsh says, is everyone on Svenson just because he opened 400 to 1, or is there something there? I had no idea he opened at 400 to 1. I didn't bet him or anything like that. I just like what we saw down there during the Florida swing. This is kind of like a Florida-esque golf course. Of course, it's a coastal golf course, Hilton Head, an island, that tropical type of feel. But more importantly, the Florida golf courses are positional golf courses where ball striking matters and making sure that you're accurate off the tee matters. That's what matters at Hilton Head, right? So if there's a correlation between those type of golf courses and then what we're going to see this week, I think you want to try and be early on in Adam Svenson, particularly somebody who's a rookie like him, who we haven't seen very much of, who has Bryson's old caddy on the bag, who I do think that may actually speak to his pedigree, right? He wouldn't just caddy for anyone out there. I do like him this week. I think that there's definitely something there. Chris Palmer says maybe Streelman over Hadman in that line I just asked about. I think you can go to either one. I think they're both strong plays for cash. Like I said, I'm much less worried about the ownership for Hadman and cash. Pretty much doesn't bother me at all. But I like both plays. It's $100 difference, right? So you are getting $100 more savings going to a Kevin Streelman. So I guess it would depend on what you could buy with that extra $100. I don't expect it would be all that much of a difference. So maybe go ahead and play around with that, Chris. But I wouldn't mind going either direction. I love both plays. And Ken says, how many guys are you playing? You can see that in my player pool. This is for a 150 max, right? So this in general tab right here, this is for a 150 max. Out of all the yeses, all of them in all the core picks, sleeper picks, values, they will 100% be in my player pool. The guys down as blanks most likely aren't going to be in the player pool. There might be 2 to 3 of them get added. But it's going to be in the 45 to 50 player range. That's what I do usually for my 150 maxes. Sometimes I'll be a little bit more aggressive. I'll play closer to like 38 to 45 guys if I'm being a little bit more aggressive. But this week, because it's a 130 player field, I'm going to spread it out a little bit more, right? I'm going to take closer to 45, 50 players in my player pool. Hopefully that answers your question. I'm playing in 150 max, right? So it's not like I'm playing 5 to 10 lineups and playing 40, 50 players in my player pool, right? A much different situation there. All right. Let's go ahead and start talking about some of the strategy here for this week. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Actually, I got to bring up DraftKings first. That would help. So let me go ahead and do that. And I guess while we talk about that, we'll talk about some of my lineup construction for this week. I'm going to try and vary it up as much as possible because, we've seen quite a few long shots here at the RBC Heritage over the years. Just think Stuart Sink last year. Guys like Wesley Bryan, Brendan Grace won here. 100 to 1, maybe even longer winners at the RBC Heritage. So in terms of lineup construction, I don't think you have to have somebody in your lineup that's $10,000 plus, right? I'm going to have plenty of lineups where I'm starting in the 9K range, who maybe my most expensive player is going to be a Daniel Berger, right? Let's, assume that somebody like Daniel Berger ends up winning this week, right? You want to take more of a balanced approach. So this week, I'm going to have, quite a few different lineup constructions. I'm going to have a few where I'm taking 2 studs in lineups where I'm trying to be as aggressive as possible up top because I'm expecting that to be relatively contrarian this week. And I'm going to try and do ones where, I'm spinning down and completely avoiding the 10K range. I'm going to kind of take the 2 extremes. I'm not going to do my usual thing where I'm taking one guy in the 10K, one guy in the 9, one guy in the 8, kind of like I would if you were just taking all of my core picks in a lineup or that type of thing, just because that's going to be extremely popular. I would expect the quote-unquote standard build on DraftKings to be the quote-unquote chalk build here for this type of golf tournament, just because that's what makes sense. There's solid plays across the board. And if you're playing cash, I still think you can go with that type of build, right? But if I'm playing in one of these large field type of contests, let me go ahead and show you what that would look like. And we'll do a couple of them. We'll start one that's a little bit more aggressive up top where we take 2 of those studs, maybe be a little bit less balanced than we would be otherwise. And then we're going to do one where we start in the 9K range where we are extremely balanced, almost too balanced for our own good in our lineup, just to show you the 2 opposite ends of the spectrum there. So let's start with the more aggressive of the 2. So we're going to go ahead and take Colin Morikawa in this lineup, who's one of my favorite plays on the slate. And the other stud option is going to be Patrick Cantlay. So let's assume in this lineup you want to take both of those studs. You can see that puts us at $7,400 remaining per player. So we could still live in the 7K range if we wanted to. Now I'm going to try and sneak in another guy in this 8K range just to really try and hone in on how aggressive I would be in this type of build. So let's go ahead and put Terrell Hatton in there at $8,600. And let's go ahead and put somebody like Chris Kirkin here at $8,000. You can see for our last 2 plays, that puts us at $6,600. But because I do like so many of these plays down low, I'm going to be comfortable getting to some of these type of lineups, where I'm getting to somebody like a Svenson, right? Putting him there at $6,400. And then at $6,800, I absolutely love going to guys like Damon and then going to guys like Griffin, right? Or even a Bo Hostler, who we talked about a little bit before. So I'm going to be very comfortable going to these type of builds where I take somebody like Alanto Griffin here, and I'm very aggressive up top, taking 2 10K plus guys, taking 2 guys in this 8K range, rather than being a little bit more balanced about it across the board. So this is the type of build I'd be going with in a more aggressive lineup. And obviously, you can tinker with this, change a bunch of guys out of there. But it's just that type of lineup construction in general that I'm going for. Now on the opposite end of the spectrum, the other type of lineup I'd be going with is a more balanced or more passive build, where I'm starting here maybe with Daniel Berger, trying to kind of jam in guys like Matthew Fitzpatrick that I really like. You go to guys like Terrell Hatton here. Let's see, you still have $7,400 remaining. You can take guys like Jason Kochrack, who we talked about, Brian Harmon, right? You have $6,700, so you still have quite a bit of salary left for your last guy. You can take somebody like Brendan Grace, who I talked about, Nate Lashley, who's really good with those long irons, Matthew Neesmith. Just like when you take this really balanced approach, right, you still want to take somebody down here in the 6K range, but you can take guys across the board that you feel really confident in. So this is the other build I'm going to try and go with, because the chalk build, just to show you what the chalk's going to look like, right? It's going to be taking guys like Colin Morikawa. It's going to be taking guys down here. Where's Russell Henley at? There he is, $9,000. It's going to be going down here to guys like $8,200 Tommy Fleetwood. I think Kevin Na is going to be relatively chalk. Actually, let's put let's put Na and Hadwin in here, because Hadwin's going to be like 23% owned. That puts us at $7,200 remaining for the last guy. Let's just put Glover in there. Doesn't matter who the last guy is. Glover might not be the chalk guy at $7,200, but it doesn't matter. These top 5 guys, right? It's going to be this type of build that's chalky, right? A 10, a 9, an 8, and then all 7s. That is going to be what 99. Well, I don't want to say 99. That's just not true. A lot of the field is going to play this way. You're going to see a lot of people just try and take the quote unquote normal DFS build where you're kind of taking somebody in each price range and then avoiding the 6K range because, a lot of the casuals that were playing at the Masters that are kind of just getting into golf because it is relatively early in the season aren't going to want to take the guys that they haven't heard about. Guys like a Doug Gim that they have no idea who that is, right? They can't put a face to a name. Or even guys like a Mackenzie Hughes, who they've probably never heard of before, unless they were watching the U.S. Open and happened to see him up there in the top 5. Whereas, obviously, with the knowledge that we have, a lot of the shots gained metrics at our disposal, we know that there's quite a few good plays down here, right? So it's going to let us to differentiate our lineups. So that's the type of build that I would be trying to avoid in some of these large field tournaments. And the best way to do that, is just to set a group of all like the chalky plays that you're still willing to play and maybe set a maximum of only playing like 3 of them together, right? So instead of having, 4 of the slots up there up top being guys that are 15 to 20% owned, you can avoid most of those builds. You probably want to do that anyways, right? You don't want to have a lineup that just has all the chalk in it. If you're going to have any chalk in your player pool, like I'm doing with somebody like a Colin Morikawa, somebody like a Matthew Fitzpatrick who's going to be chalky, maybe even a Shane Lowry, I don't want to play all 3 of those guys together. Or maybe, for example, a better option would have been, one of these guys like a Kevin Na or an Adam Hadman, right? You don't want to play out of those 5 players. You don't want to have 3 of them in the same lineup, right? So that would be a way to do that. The other way to do it is just to scrub them afterwards, right? So in my optimizer, I use one myself that I've designed, right? I'm an electrical engineer. I have a lot of coding and programming experience. And across a variety of different programming languages. Either way, though, I'm able to customize that, right? So in my optimizer, and again, you guys don't have access to this, I want to make it available at some point. Trust me, I've been asked about it a million times. It's going to happen at some point, just it takes a lot of work. It's a lot more work than you guys probably imagine. I'm able to set an attribute, right, where I can call a guy like a 10K guy, right? So anybody $10,000 plus, I can set an attribute to them that calls them a quote unquote like 10K player. I can say anybody that is between, $9,900 and $9,000, a 9K player, right? So I can set these tags, right? And then in my lineups, I can make sure that I don't have a 10, a 9, an 8, and 4 7s together, or whatever combination that is. And that's what I end up doing with my optimizer. So it's that's the beauty of being able to code your own stuff. And of course, not everybody's capable of doing that. But that's the beauty with doing that type of thing for sure. All right, so let's go ahead and catch up on chat and some of the questions here. So first off, we have, let me make sure I'm getting with the right question. It's Ken down here. So how many guys you're playing? And he says, do you think Kevin Na can go low? So I do think he can go low. He was one of the first people I fired an outright bet on because his number was 55-1. I just thought the number made a lot of sense for Kevin Na. He's, relatively short player. Looked really good at the Masters, looked really good at the match play, ended up getting through the group stages there, was really sharp at the iron play as well, even though we didn't have shots gained metrics. And he's had a lot of success at this golf course specifically. So Ken, I do think he can go low. It's just a matter of how low. I think that he has a chance to win this golf tournament, but perhaps the better bet would be for him to finish in the top 10. So let me go ahead and share the screen here. We're going to go ahead and make a cash lineup together and then go ahead and get out of here. So for our cash lineup, I'm trying to take as much chalk as possible. And I think the best chalky play up top in terms of cash is no doubt going to be a Colin Morikawa. For a next man in, I really like Daniel Berger. Maybe for cash though, because we want to try and eat some of that chalk, right? It's actually advantageous to eat the chalk in cash. If you're looking for a breakdown on that, I will be doing a cash strategy video at some point. But just for the Spark Notes version, you want to take as much chalk as possible. Let's go ahead and put Matt Fitzpatrick in there. That puts us at $7,500. So I wouldn't mind taking somebody in the 8K range, but it might be a little bit too aggressive. Let's go ahead and try and take Chris Kirk. Let's see if we have enough salary to do so. Still have $7,500, so we can probably get away with it. Really like Kevin Na this week. I think you have to take Hadwin if you're playing cash just because of the ownership. And that puts us at $6,900. And see, that's the issue. I don't love anyone at $6,900. So we'd go down to 68. Be able to take somebody like Alanto Griffin and finish out a lineup. This is what I would be looking at in cash. Now, if you wanted to spend up from Kevin Na, right, who's at 79? I don't think there's anybody I love at 79. McNeely, Kochrack. Like, if you really wanted to go from Kevin Na to Jason Kochrack, you could. But I almost like Kevin Na more than Jason Kochrack this week, right? So it would be this type of build that I'd be going with for cash, which it's guys that are good course fits and are coming in with good recent form. That's the case for Colin Morikawa. It's the same thing with Fitzpatrick, Kirk, and Na. Same thing with, of course, Adam Hadman. Lanto Griffin, maybe not so much, right? When you're taking somebody in the 6K range or even the lower 7K range, they are going to at least have one flaw, but he's been good at these plotter type of golf courses. And of late, hasn't been in horrible recent form, right? He hasn't been great. If you take a look at his game log here, right, outside of some of the miscuts, made the cut at API, made the cut at Valero, Genesis, looked decent at Pebble, which is a good comp course here, looked decent at Farmers, American Express. Outside of those, two rough miscuts, he's been pretty decent, right? So putting that aside, relatively good course fit there. This is the type of lineup I'll be going with there in cash. So that's all I'm going to have for this week, guys. I appreciate you guys stopping by as per usual. If you guys haven't already liked the live stream, make sure you go ahead and do so. I appreciate that a whole lot. And we are going to have prize picks content throughout the weekend and showdown live streams. So I expect to go live maybe around 8:30 p.m., depending on when these rounds end, to cover each of the rounds for Friday through Sunday. So make sure to look forward to that. It will be posted on my social media. So if you're looking for links to that, times when I'll be going live, that sort of fun stuff. We do have another question down in the chat I'll cover on before we get out of here, which is from Chris Palmer, who says, my original cash line for this week was Lowry, Fitz, Henley, Hadman, Knox, and Lanto. So those are your thoughts. I still like Lowry in there. So if you don't want to spend the whole way up for Colin Morikawa, I think he's a great substitute there. Fitz, Henley. So I think it makes sense if you're trying to go him as chalk there. Hadman, of course, Knox, and Lanto. Love it. I think that makes perfect sense. So that's a little bit more of a balanced build than going to Colin Morikawa, which I don't hate either. As I said before, I'm a little bit more willing to be balanced than aggressive when it comes to my cash lineups to try and avoid the 6K guys. But if you're going to take anybody in that 6K range like you did, taking Lanto Griffin makes a whole lot of sense. So absolutely love it, Chris. Best of luck this week, Chris, with your cash lineups. I know that's your main thing here. Best of luck to everyone out there with your GPP lineups, cash lineups, bets, prize picks, I don't know, whatever you guys are doing for this week. If you're just supporting your favorite player, best of luck in that front as well. I'll be with you guys this weekend for the showdown and prize pick stuff I was talking about before. And I'll talk to you guys later.